Berg here in sunny Long Beach, California for IANA Intermodal Expo, one of the best intermodal conferences of the year at one of the busiest ports in North America. How's your experience been so far?
The experience so far has been absolutely wonderful.
What's your experience been like at Expo?
It's been incredible.
So we will see you here at Intermodal Expo 2023. Hey, supply chainers, wherever you are in the world, this is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. That's right, I'm back. Last week, I was in Miami for the Firmament Conference, which I will show you a little bit more in just a few minutes. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, as well as the Blended Podcast, founder of the Blended Pledge, and there's so much to talk to you about today. But before we do that, let's talk about our sponsor for the show. What are your business's supply chain challenges? Too much inventory on hand? Too many disruptions and stockouts? Are there just too many steps and touch points involved? Well, Fastenal can tailor a solution from automated bins that monitor your inventory 24/7 to vending devices that help you track and control the products that keep your businesses running. Go to fastenal.com/LTSC to see how Fastenal, where industry meets innovation. And like I said, we've got a lot to talk about today, so I'm really excited to be here. And Susan is going to be joining me up on stage in just a few minutes. But first, let's talk about what is new with Let's Talk Supply Chain. So we've got a brand new episode with tracking. Now, if you haven't heard of tracking, you're definitely going to want to go and listen to this episode 341, wherever you tune in to the show. And he's talking about empty containers and the movement of empty containers and how do we move those empty containers so that we are making it so much more efficient, so much more optimized, and so much more effective. So go and check out what Patrick Lowe of Tracking is doing. He tells us all about how it works and how he's making an impact in the industry. What else is new? Oh, here we go. So this is just a bit of a preview and an overview of the Firmament Conference last week in Miami. Now, I actually hosted 2 panel discussions. We talked about risks in supply chains, and then we also talked about the opportunities. And I got a chance to interview some of the folks there, talking about what they're thinking about in the industry, what's keeping them up at night. And so stay tuned because we are going to share some of that with you just in a little bit. What else do we have? We've got a brand new episode of the Blended Podcast, episode 32. Now, this is introverts versus extroverts. What's the difference? Now, I learned so much on this particular episode, and the ladies that joined me had so much to share. So go and check it out. I think we're probably going to change how you think about introverts versus extroverts and what society actually thinks about one over the other, which is mind-blowing. What else have we got? We've got a brand new Woman in Supply Chain blog, and we featured Marissa Martin of Bloom, and she talks about finding a seat at the supply chain table. And this is a really, really great article to dive into her journey as a woman in supply chain and what that has looked like. So please go and check that out. We've also got Log Tech Live happening on Friday. But Eric's on vacation, so I'm going to be hosting this one, and James is going to be my guest for that particular episode. Click the attend button, 10 a.m. Eastern on Friday. Even if you can't make it live, click the attend button for any of our shows, and we actually send you the link after the show so you can watch it on your own time. So go and check that out. Last but absolutely not least, we have the Secret Society of Supply Chain. If you have not gone to take the quiz and joined the wait list, we have limited spots and we are just about to launch these membership groups. So go and claim your spot so that you can be one of the founding members and be one of the first people in the Secret Society of Supply Chain. And we'll let you know a little bit more about that. Anyways, now it's time to bring up Susan. Susan, hello. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Okay, I launched SJKargel Consulting in 2022. And what we do is help 3PLs, importers create strategies and identify and build contingencies for operating in diminished capacities. And I mention cyber attacks quite a bit because they just cause such extreme irregular operations.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the same contingencies that you put in place for a cyber attack are extremely useful in a different type of disruption. So my background, it went so fast, industry's been so good to me, but it includes 40 years in the freight forwarding, 3PL, customs brokerage sector, 13 years in district manager roles. And then I joined Expeditors and was there for 20 years. I held multiple regional roles, and the last 10 years was in the global customs product group. In that role, I was, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but considering I started my company based on this, I was part of the for the customs team, the recovery and retrospective, and it was really interesting and probably why I'm here today.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking all about cybersecurity, cyber attacks. It's something that I've been talking about on the show for quite a few months now, being one of the biggest and top risks in supply chain. And we're going to cover all aspects of that today, which I'm super excited about because it was one of the big topics that we spoke about on the panel discussions at the Firmament conference. So people are talking about this. People want to know what is happening, how they can protect themselves, what it actually looks like if they were to be attacked. So very grateful that we're talking about this. But before we do that, and you're going to give us a market update in just a minute. But before we do that, we are going to talk about the poll of the week. So the question that we asked you all last week, what is the best email sign off? So 61% of you said best wishes, warm regards. 21% of you said sincerely, and we had a tie. 9% for no sign off, or share your opinion below. Susan, how do you sign off your email?
My default is best regards, but sometimes I'll delete it, and just put Susan or change it depending who the audience is. I like that warmest regards too. I think best wishes. I think that's nice too.
Yeah, a lot of people in the comments for this particular poll were saying that it depends who you're actually writing to on the email. My go-to, and it's actually been mentioned on LinkedIn by a few people a number of times, is 2-hour success. That's one that I'm very well known for. And I like that because everything that I do, obviously with the sign, collaboration is the future of business. My company name means winning together. So I'm all about, mutual success, mutual benefit and things like that. And so I started using that a couple of years ago. But I think your sign off needs to say something about cyber.
Oh, I'll have to think about that.
This.
I'll think about that. Okay.
To your cyber success or something like that.
That's my goal. My goal this week is to think of that. Okay.
To your cyber success. If anybody who's listening and watching this and you have any suggestions, put them in the comments for Susan, and she is going to change her sign off based on
this week. This week.
Information that we come up today.
Okay, I'm depending on everybody.
All right. So why don't you give us a bit of a market update? What are you hearing? What are your customers asking you about? Like, what's really on everybody's mind?
They're really worried that if they were hit by a cyber attack, what do they do? And customers are in different degrees of preparedness. Some have put together, and I want to split this into two things. There's preventive cybersecurity, which the IT people preventive, and then there's, oh crap, I was just hit with a cyber attack. What do I do? You have to prepare for that, because whatever it is, if you don't prepare, you're going to have to go through all of those same steps when the cyber attack, if the cyber attack hits. You don't get out of it. And if you're able to prepare for it in advance, you're not going to get rid of every risk and every impact. But what you can do is reduce the time. So instead of reduce the time, which reduces risk and reduces impact, reduces cost. And if you're able to reduce that time, and instead of going, oh crap, go, oh, I need to get my team together, you just saved yourself a couple hours. So it's each one of those things will help you through that process. So people are at different stages. Some of them have put a plan together and they kind of want to know, did I do this right? What are some of the what ifs? Like, can you help me with that? Some, and it kind of, some people have global business process groups where they've been very involved and they just want you to review it. Some companies need a little bit more hand holding, need to know where to start. So it's, but everybody's concerned.
Absolutely. And I think you've got a survey that you wanted to share with us.
Oh yeah.
I thought there was some pretty interesting results that came from that.
Yeah. So one of them is I'm going to have to read this off. The survey, Sophos, it's a State of Ransomware 2022, and they surveyed 5,600 IT professionals.
That's a lot of people.
Across 31 countries. And the research was conducted in January and February 2022. And so that 66% of the respondents were hit by ransomware last year. 65% of that's a lot. 65% of the attacks resulted in data encryption. Of those attacked, 46% paid the ransom. Of those companies that paid the ransom, 61% their data was restored, and only 61% of their data was restored. So they did not get all their data back. And only 4% of those companies got all their data back. And that's down from the year before. 21% of those that paid the ransoms paid less than $10,000. But the average payout, and this is looking at 2021, and that's increased. The average payout was over $800,000 after removing the outliers. And then the average remediation cost was $1.4 million. 90% of the attack impacted their ability to operate. 86% said it caused loss of business or revenue. And the average time to recover was 1 month. And then there was some other information, multiple statistics, I won't go into them, but it indicated that many companies are using multiple ways to restore their data. So without them saying paying the ransom, backup data, such stuff.
Yeah. And we've put that survey into the comments. So if you want to go and check that out and check some more of those stats and information, go and check out the link in the comment. Thank you for sharing that with us. We had a LinkedIn user, I'm sorry, I can't see your name, but 46% paid. I mean, that's incredible. And, 66% of that's 3,600 people who were affected. And that's as of January, February 2022. I mean, when we look at 2023 and it being one of the top risks of supply chain, I mean, supply chain professionals need to take that survey back to their teams, back to their management, and be like, hey, this is real. That was over a year ago this survey was done, and things have just increased from there. So it's a really big deal.
And the data, if it's a data breach, the average cost is $4.35 million. Wow. So it's a lot of money involved.
It is a lot of money. Oh, Sam. Okay. It's Sam who was questioning, or who was surprised by the 46% paid. And it's a lot of money. Now, talking about that, let's get into our first article, but I do want to say hi to Mohammed over on my personal LinkedIn. Thanks so much for joining us. Now, this particular article does talk about 2022. So this goes back to January 2022 as well. But even then, they talk about how attractive supply chains are to cyber attacks. And it's because they can do large scale extortion attacks, and they can go through the SMEs, because there's a lot of different sized organizations involved in a supply chain, and they're looking for the vulnerable points. And there's a lot of SMEs that are involved in a supply chain in a variety of different ways. It could be a tier 5 supplier, potentially, maybe, that you haven't even thought about, that they can get in through there. And some of the examples in this particular article, within days of a cyber attack, 800 to 1500 downstream was affected in some of these examples. I mean, it's just crazy. And it's also dependent on your relationship with your partners and whether they give you the information about whether they were attacked or not. Another example in this article was that an organization got attacked in 2019, did not tell anybody till 2020, and there's still effects in 2021. I mean, there's so much to cover here. Susan, talk to me about this article.
So one thing, there's notification requirements going out. So companies will have to begin to notify. So that's one thing. Yeah. So when you think about a supply chain, there's nodes, which is where the freight lays to rest. So that could be like a port, a warehouse, a distribution facility, a retail facility. Then you have links, which would be like your carriers, your vessels, carriers, communication between all of those things. And then vectors, which would be like people and unpatched software, misconfigured software, misconfigured APIs. And so then when you then start to look at supply chain, you have like let's take a 3PL. It's a global network. You have lots of facilities, lots across many countries. You use many carriers, and you're dependent on small companies like small truckers to get the goods delivered. You have dispersed remote workforces, which can cause some other they're using desktop protocols and things. And then diverse customer bases with lots of trading partners, as you mentioned. And then you're moving documents and data between all these things.
Right.
And so there's so many different entry points, so many players in it, that it's not really, I think it was NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, that said it's not if you get hit with a cyber attack, it's when you get it. And the companies must understand, businesses must understand how to operate in a diminished capacity, and need to understand how the priorities for putting their systems back online.
Absolutely. One of the other things that it said in this article, and Tony, Nicole, Tony doesn't see the stats. So Tony, I'm going to make sure that we put that survey link into the LinkedIn comments so that you can see those. Thanks for letting us know. So one of the other things that it talked about in this article was recovery from a virus actually means uneven supply and demand. So we've been seeing this uneven supply and demand across the pandemic because obviously we had to shut down manufacturing facilities and those kinds of things. But there's also cyber attacks that are also contributing to the uneven supply and demand, or could contribute to that as well, which I thought was an interesting point.
I think it was Eric Kaiser that said the one thing about supply, or maybe it was on a show, maybe you said it, the one thing about supply chain is it never stops. Well, you just mentioned with a cyber attack, it comes to a standstill or a trickle, and that does lead to the supply and demand.
Yeah,
issue.
and we're going to talk about some of that with an example a little bit later on. But I want to talk about your blog on LinkedIn, because this actually talks about the disruptions of cyber attacks, but it also goes into discussing, what can happen in a cyber attack. So go through that with us. What can happen? What does that look like?
So what happens is your systems might go dark, and a company might bring their systems down themselves, as Expeditors did, and Hellman did, and I think Toll Group did as well. Or the cyber attack might bring your systems down, as what happened in Maersk. But when that happens, it could be all of your systems or most of your systems, and systems go dark. So you lose the visibility. You can't see it. The shipments stop. when shipments stop, demurrage occurs. It also, you go into a manual environment, and we'll talk about in a moment, like scalability, what that means. Think about customs declarations. If you have 3,000 lines, trying to type those out, your staff gets extraordinarily stressed because everything takes longer, and the whole issue of a cyber attack is very different than a hurricane where everybody's going through at the same time. It's more company dependent. And when shipments stop, demurrage starts to set in, and that can be very expensive. Customers get angry, rightfully so, and business is lost, whether that's temporarily or not. So that's kind of the operational impact of it. On the enterprise risk side, you have increased compliance risk, because think about if you go into a manual environment and you're denied party screening, instead of having your system go through and do that screening on itself, you're doing it manually,
And human error. Right?
Human error, right.
Yeah.
A lot. Demurrage and other fees that can go into, you can look at Expediter's annual report. It's in the millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars. There's going to be recovery and remediation costs. So when a cyber attack hits, typically you engage with cyber experts and small group cyber experts, and they help formulate the communication that goes down, and they help you through the recovery, but it costs, millions of dollars.
Yep.
Potential legal fees, shipment related claims. It impacts your cash flow because you're not billing for a while, because you don't have your system to bill it. Brand damage, and then you could have short-term business loss, and all of your initiatives that you were working on, your strategic initiatives, get put on hold for a while.
Yeah.
So
your milestones, your timelines get pushed off. So the other question I have for you, what can we do in advance? Now, some of the conversations I was having last week in Miami were about training your teams, right? Because a lot of this ransomware can come through a link in an email, a link in a text message. I actually, a couple of weeks ago, one of the people that work for me got a text message that told them that they needed to do something on my behalf and signed it my name. So now they're using text message and things like that as well. And so I had to go back to my team and say, do not answer anything from this particular number, obviously, And they gave us an example last week of how AI is being used to accumulate images to create people who do not exist, or to figure out voices. And one example that he used was that they created a voice through AI, contacted the CFO, told the CFO as the CEO's voice to transfer $240,000 to a particular bank account. And the CEO was like, what did you do? And they were like, you told us to do this.
Right.
And this is what I think some of the challenges with AI and what we're going to be seeing as far as cybersecurity, et cetera, moving forward. So what can we do in advance?
Okay, so what you mentioned, the return on investment on training is extremely high. So that's definitely put that in place. Also, on the preparedness side, I would strongly suggest that milestones be safeguarded. So think about the documents. Think about if you're an importer and you're sending your commercial invoices by EDI to your broker. What if the EDI needs to be cut, whether it's because you're having a cyber attack or they're having a cyber attack? So you want to have a contingency for that. Are you able to get that EDI in a different format? You want to know the sources of where your documents come from, alternate formats, the escalation process for if something happens. And that's something that everybody can kind of work on now as a preventive, a contingency if that happens. The other thing is make sure you have your teams set up. Know how to, if all of a sudden you don't have your system, know how you're going to be contacting your team, and set up a cadence for how often you're going to contact, like the daily meeting, etc. And I think those two things are really helpful. There's other things as well. There's lots of things to put in place. Play the what if. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if
Yeah.
this happens? And just kind of start going through those what ifs.
Yeah.
The documents, important.
And
You can't-
working with a consultant too, I think is important,
Oh,
so
yeah,
that you
yeah,
can go
yeah.
through all of those scenarios. So if anybody
Mhm.
has any questions or anything like that for Susan, now's the time to ask it, except for we only have a few minutes left. But make sure to reach out to Susan on LinkedIn to ask those questions. Now, we do have a question from the audience. Rohini, Susan, what are some interesting startups you are tracking that are focused on supply chain cybersecurity?
So it's there's a lot of companies that are giving a lot of information out. Like Hexnote has, and I'll put that on my LinkedIn page. Has a lot of security webinars going on. They have one coming up, and I don't have it with me. I'll put it through. That goes through. It's a 2-hour webinar that goes through all the supply chain bill of materials and various aspects. And I think that would be
Wow.
a good place to go for information. I'll get that
Amazing.
for you.
And I
give
think,
it to you afterwards.
Rohini, if you want to connect with Susan offline, I'm sure she could provide some of
Yes.
those names for you.
Happy
So
to.
we're going to go into the last article. Now, the last article that we're showcasing really talks about just examples. And so one of the example that I think a lot of people in supply chain did hear about in 2022 was the breach at Expeditors International.
Mhm.
Now, they shut down all the systems globally. And Susan, this is something that you spoke about as well in regards to what can happen during a cyber
Mhm.
attack. And
Yeah.
shutting down all systems globally when it comes to a logistics provider, I mean, cargo needs to be moved, right? It
And-
can't be stopped in its tracks. But that is exactly what happened in this example.
Mhm.
So I would implore everybody to go and check out the link for this particular article and check out the story and the conversation around what happened at Expeditors. But I think you have another example with Maersk, and
Right.
it changes by company, right?
Exactly. So with Expeditors, Expeditors shut down the systems. With Maersk, they shut down the cyber attack shut down their systems, and the article gives a blow by blow of what happened. It's really interesting. It for any company that's going through and planning their response, it gives you a lot of the issues, which will give you some guidelines of what to do. So I think it's fascinating, riveting read. Enjoyed it. It's a really interesting article and will give you a lot of advice.
Yeah, so we have posted the article with the Expeditors example in the comments. And then Susan's also given us the link to the article about Maersk that gives us a play-by-play of what exactly happened, so that you can take a look at what can happen, what is possible.
Mhm.
So you can take a look at your processes and figure out what you need to do internally so that you can make sure that you are as well
Mhm.
protected as possible. It's one of the biggest risks in supply chain right now that we have to sit down and take a look at. And Susan can definitely help you with that as well. So before we go, I do want to let you know where we're going to be. So as mentioned at the top of the show, I'm going to be hosting LogTech Live on Friday, and we're going to be talking about the mystical world of forwarders and their software needs. Now, if you can't attend live, make sure to click the attend button, and I will send you the link so you can watch the show afterwards. And then June 14th and 15th, we are going to be recording episodes on site at Home Delivery World. Plus, I'm going to be on stage with Seco and Reveal for some panel discussions as well, with some pretty fun topics too. And so that's pretty much it for now when it comes to upcoming events. We've got a lot of upcoming events coming up in the fall that I can't wait to talk to you about. And so, Susan, any last words for anybody watching this and thinking about cyber attacks and cybersecurity?
Start planning, start building your contingencies. Don't worry if you don't have everything finished, because you're never going to have it finished, but just start. And if something happens, you'll be glad you did.
Amazing. And Tony, I see it again. We have tagged you in the comments, so hopefully you can see the links in the comments now as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week, and we hope you have an amazing week ahead. Go and connect with Susan, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.